Hey climbers, it is Anthony and Brendan from Escape Climbing. We're just shooting a little video talking about forerunning today. We get a lot of questions about what makes a good forerunner. How do you go through that process? I'm a firm believer that good route setting is good forerunning. It's a team effort, it's collaborative, and so Brendan set a route out on the Escape demo wall. I'm going to go out there, give my initial impressions of it. I'll walk you guys through a couple of things that I look for in terms of what makes for a good commercial route, which is different than what you might find if you were setting for a competition. So we're looking strictly within the lens of commercial setting. And so a couple of the criteria that I'll be looking for is it fair, fun, engaging, and safe? So by fair, I mean, can I access to climb? Can somebody who's a foot shorter than me access to climb? Is it fair and climbable for both of us? Is it fun? Is it movement that's not tweaky? Is it weird and awkward that is going to be prone to injuries? Is it something that I'm going to want to climb again after I get off the climb? That's a more subjective one, so that's harder to really nail down. Is it engaging? So as route setters, we have the opportunity to teach people movements, whether that's drop knee or heel hook or toe hook. We want to use every opportunity to encourage the climber to grow and push outside their comfort zone. So we want to set engaging, interesting movement that's not just repetitive, the same thing over and over, and dull, monotonous. So we want them to have an engaging experience. And then finally, we want it to be safe. That one probably should come first, but we're route setters, so safety third. And by safe, we're going to be looking at, is this move tweaky? Is it dangerous? Am I going to wing off the route and fly off the pad into somebody else? Are the routes crossing over each other? And then we're going to look at other things like, are the set screws nice and flush so that we don't catch our thumb on anything like that? So those are just going to be a couple of things. We're looking for fair, fun, engaging, and safe. So I have no experience with this climb yet, so we have Brendan, he set the route. We're just going to ask, what are we looking at out here? Tell me about the movement.
So the movement was inspired by the Hulk out in Bishop. I did a little tweak to it to make it a little bit easier to do. So it starts off out on a volume, you reach out to a side pull, you get into a nice high heel hook, and then you reach all the way behind yourself to a pinch. From that, you get out of the heel hook, you either reach up to grab the jug that's between the crack, or you hand jam and bump up into it. Mm-hmm. You get your feet onto that pinch you started off on. You go out to another legacy pinch, you match it, get your feet out, you go to a jug, and you can either rose or cross to the final jug and then finish out the route. Okay,
cool. So it sounds like when you sit down at the end of the setting day, you're gonna have been setting with your entire crew, so you have a pretty good idea of throughout the day what Brendan was thinking. Like he'll at some point have probably said, "Oh, I wanted to force the Hulk toe hook cross back move," and so that's going to probably be the feature of this route, really forcing and encouraging that move. The rest of the moves need to be interesting and engaging, but they sound like they're a little bit secondary to that singular section. So we're going to head out there and check it out. So stay tuned. Alright guys, we're back at the Escape demo wall. Here's Brendan's route. A couple things we're going to do from the ground is we're going to check it out, make sure that we understand the movement that Brendan was trying to encourage, and then think through how we might engage with the route, and kind of come up with a couple of things that we want to be on the lookout for. I think it's better to go into somebody else's route with an idea of what you're about to get into rather than just blindly jumping on and starting to climb. You can give a little bit better feedback then because you have a couple things that you know what you're looking for. That's not to say that we're just going to go in there and try and break his beta, because I think good forerunning isn't about trying to break people's beta. It's about understanding what the setter was trying to encourage and then understanding, did it actually accomplish that? If it did, is it the easiest way to accomplish that? And that's where breaking beta really comes in. If you can break the beta and do it in an easier way that just bypasses what they intended, well then we should think through how do we force that movement a bit better. But if the setter actually encouraged the movement and it's the easiest way to do it, well then breaking the beta and making it 2 grades harder doesn't really accomplish anything. So you as a forerunner shouldn't be wasting your time trying to nitpick those type of things. Initially as I look at this, there's a couple of things that stand out to me from the standpoint of being fair, being fun, engaging, and safe. So the first thing is, if you guys want to come in and take a look, we do have a problem with the way that the set screws are currently sitting inside of the hold. So up here on these particular holds, these are new legacy shapes that we just came off the line. These are prototypes. They haven't gone to production yet. And so the set screw doesn't actually sit flush in there like it should. What we're gonna do is, here at Escape, we're gonna re-drill these to make sure that those screws do sit flush, but we don't want this ever to be sticking up to catch a thumb or catch a finger on. So that's one thing that we want to be looking for. Another thing that I look for is just to make sure volumes are actually attached to the wall with enough screws. Never take it for granted that the person that set the route put enough set screws in, put enough bolts in. I've seen too many volumes get ripped off the wall. It's everybody's responsibility on the crew to make sure that everything is affixed to the wall as it should be. So these volumes actually are attached correctly. The only thing that I have concerns about from a setting standpoint is possibly the start hold and possibly that pinch up there. And so the concern I have with this hold is that currently it has one set screw and one Lone Star into it. So that's 2 screws to affix what I would consider like a small to medium size hold. Now, it's probably enough screws. I'm not concerned about it for our applications here because we're gonna be the only ones climbing on it, but in a commercial facility, I would maybe have set another set screw over on this wing just to put a 3rd screw in there, just because screws aren't very strong. The Lone Star is a great tool because it fills that bolt hole, but it's not the same as a bolt. It's not super strong, you're still on a screw. My concern with that hold up there is just that it is a little bit longer, more horizontal, and I can tell from down here that you're gonna be encouraged to match the hold. And so you're gonna be grabbing it on one wing and then you're grabbing the other wing, and that can be prone to spinning. And so that one might just be better served by having another screw in the set screw. But otherwise everything else looks like it's safely up there. From a movement standpoint, just initially on the ground, I have a couple of questions that I won't be able to answer until I get on the wall. But some things that stand out to me right now all have to do with wrist movements. And so what I mean by that is, on this initial move, I haven't tried it yet, but my gut tells me where this pinches versus where I will ultimately end up. The way that my wrist is going to be forced to flex might be uncomfortable, possibly dangerous with how the tendons load in the hand. Something to keep in mind. I won't know for sure until we get up there and do the move, but it's something that I'm going to be thinking about. The next thing I'm going to be looking at is, as I reach up into this little groove between the volumes, the groove is very narrow, and for people with big hands, it might not be able to fit in there. People with small hands might fit in there really easily. So the question I'm going to be asking is this fair for everybody? Is somebody with big meat hocks going to be able to get in there and actually grab the hold, or are they only going to get like 2 fingers in there? So we want to be thinking, is this fair for them? In terms of fun, the hold inside there, I can tell from down here, was shaped to be a right hand and not a left hand. And so the fact that we're going to be grabbing with our left hand is going to ask me the question, is this fun to grab? Is it comfortable? It might totally be fine. We won't know until we get there and grab it. These are just things that we start cycling through and start thinking through. Finally, the last thing I'm thinking about is up here at the finish, we have a known quantity here where we're going to match on that pinch, and we're going to come over here to this right hand. And then what Brendan's trying to encourage here is either a rose move or a crossover to the final hold to roll out. I have some doubts as to whether or not that's actually going to be the easiest forced move there, or if you're going to be better encouraged just to match this, and then go over. And so we'll explore that as we get there, but these are just a couple of my initial impressions for what the route holds for us. So next I'm going to throw my shoes on, we're going to give it a couple of burns and see what we get. That might need a touch. So one tip, pro forerunning tip here is forerunning isn't about sending, okay? It's not about just doing all the moves and being the first one to do it. It's about really figuring out, do the moves work? Are they good for the intended audience? And so the best way to do that is usually in little bits and parts. Do a move, do a sequence, make sure it works, come down, chalk up, think it through, pull back on into the middle, do the top. So I see too often a little bit of competitiveness in forerunning where it's like, I want to send this. I have to show the rest of the crew that I'm really strong, I can do this. And it's not about that, it's about doing the moves and making sure that they make sense. And you can usually do that when you're fresh and you're not tired. So that's one tip there. With this, we just did the beginning sequence. We did the crossover heel hook, and that works, it flows fine. I have a little bit of a flexibility issue, so getting my foot high makes it hard to get into the heel hook, but I don't think that's gonna be a prohibitive issue for tall people or short people. It's more of a flexibility question, which is cool because it encourages a different aspect of climbing rather than just pure strength or balance. You have to have a little bit of flexibility. So far this is good. We're gonna move on to the upper section, to the middle section, and then we're gonna go into the upper section. So here we go. Yeah, so I can't get my hand in there. I can get 2 fingers. So we just did the reaching up into the crack to grab the hold move. The volumes are a little bit too close together. I don't have big hands, but I do have fat hands. And I can only get 2 fingers on the hold, which isn't ideal because the way the volumes chew into your hand is actually really painful. So when we look at it, is it fair? Not really. Is it fun? I don't want to do it again. Is it engaging? Maybe if you like crack climbing, but that wasn't really what we intended on this move. So what we're gonna do is a really simple, easy tweak. It's not gonna change the route in any meaningful way, besides just making it more fair and more fun. So we're just gonna take this volume or this volume, and we're just gonna shuffle it just an inch to the right, just to create a bit more space in there. Still forces you to be accurate and precise in getting to the hold, but it's not going to create this constriction that's really painful. So I think that's going to just make the route a little bit more enjoyable and fair. So we're going to tweak that real quick, and then we're going to jump back in and do the upper section and see how it works. Alright, so Brendan just went up and he moved the volume over a little bit, creates a bigger gap for our hand to fit in there a little bit more comfortably. As a consequence, we have to think about the more things change, the more they stay the same, right? And so the same movement isn't going to work with the holds having now shifted. We need to be thinking, okay, what is the move that this is now going to lean towards? So what I mean by that is, with this volume here, it really serves no practical value, right? It doesn't serve in a meaningful way to make that a precision move. So what I want to think about is how can we incorporate that volume into the movement that follows? And one of the things that jumps out to me immediately is with that pinch up there, the one that we know we're inevitably going to have to match, my question is, if we turn that vertically to a vertical pinch, making it very difficult to match, could we then force the setter or the climber to come into the volume and use that as a side pull, and then from this position go again right hand around the arete? If we move that hold in a little bit and turn it side pull, we then come into it, we get good opposition, we work our feet over, and from this position, remember earlier when I said I have fears that we're going to be encouraged to match that hold? Well, if it's a more side pull and we're coming around the arete at the same time, it's going to be very hard to match it. Then we might have a chance of forcing the rows or crossover move. So what I'm going to do, I'm going to go up here real quick, I'm going to turn that pinch just a little bit, and then I'm going to move that hold over to try and encourage this new movement. So stay tuned. Might be.
All right, so I see one potential way to maybe break the beta. I think it's going to be harder than the actual route itself, but now that we've actually run the moves, this is the time that we want to start thinking about alternatives and see, is it actually deceptively easy to just cheat and break the beta? So we want to avoid that as much as possible, so we're just going to give it a couple tries. Not with my old man hamstrings, it's not happening. All you.
I don't have enough grip on the ball.
Yeah, I don't think that's gonna work. I see somebody doing that, but I don't know if it's kind of saving much time or energy. There you go. Yeah. Okay, so what we just discovered is that you can actually break the beta. It doesn't look significantly harder than doing the heel hook cross move. So an easy tweak here is just to take that pinch and put it one bolt hole higher out of reach. So if we take that, go up one, you can no longer reach it from low unless you're a giant, in which case you're an outlier. We're not going to worry about outliers. And it doesn't fundamentally change any of the other moves because that hold is still distance-wise the same distance away from the side pull volume as it was prior. It's just a little bit higher, so it doesn't change anything. So let's tweak that real quick and then we'll rerun that sequence. So in the process of having moved that pinch up one bolt hole higher, we have to keep in mind, the more things change, the more they stay the same. We might have broken something a little bit earlier in the sequence. And I think what I'm afraid of here is in this sequence, once we get the left hand, getting up to that right hand pinch is now one T-nut further away. So it doesn't change the next sequence, but getting to that hold is already a pretty powerful move because if you think about where your hand and foot are in relation to one another, your right hand's here, your left hand's there, your right foot's here. So it means your right hand and right foot are within just a very close distance of one another. And then you have to generate and pull a bit of a distance. So thinking of this through the lens of being fair, certain body types are gonna have a really hard time getting that scrunched. Really tall guys are gonna have a really hard time. Conversely, really short people might have a really hard time generating enough momentum for this. So this might be an area where we consider putting a bump hold in there. Just something right below the pinch, maybe a couple T-nuts, something that's bad enough that you can't just crank off of and use as its own isolated hold, but it's good enough that it gives you enough traction to generate and gets you out of this tight little box. So we're gonna explore that option real quick because we wanna make sure that this is as accessible as possible for the grade for as many different body types. So, 1 second. One down left. Left. There.
Hopefully.
Where are we at? Okay, so up here in this final sequence, we tweaked a couple things, and so we want to be considerate of a couple things. One is, when we do this cross under, because of the way that the next hold is facing, and namely it's, the right hand is facing at 3 o'clock and the left hand is facing at 11 o'clock. What that means is as we do the cross, our wrist on our left hand actually has to fight against itself to get into the hold, and it's not until we unwind that becomes good. As a consequence, that move is very, very difficult and insecure as you're doing this transition. As a general rule, I don't really like having to force my wrists into really abnormal positions. So within a commercial environment for setting, I tend to like to keep things a bit more neutral. So what I would do here is that last hold, instead of having it pointed at 11 o'clock towards us, I would actually rotate it so that it's more either flat or a Gaston. And the reason that I think that's gonna work better in this particular sequence is because it is so difficult to get this and roll out, you're encouraging the climber to try and break that sequence by recycling back into the pinches and then going to it as a Gaston and then transitioning with their feet. So if we turn this so it's a little bit easier, it'll be a little bit more intuitive and encouraging for the climber just to reach through, grab it, and then naturally pull up and go to the finish. So we're gonna make a slight little tweak there and then see how that influences the finale.
So as I'm doing it, I'm like really conscious about that. I need to figure out what these are. Because on the first step, part of being a steward is like, is this stuff cheap?
All right, anytime you see awkwardness during forerunning, somebody's trying to move and it looks weird, doesn't feel right, they're fighting their body, it's usually a sign that something needs to shift and tweak subtly. In this case, I think we just need to move the holds slightly away from each other just to give them a little bit more breathing room. So we're just going to do some slight little facelift. Keeping in mind that coming from here, we don't want this to be too reachy, but we do have maybe just a little bit of space to work with here. If we wanted to keep it on the same plane, we can go there. Timeless questions here. Which way do you go? Go here, or reach through. Just slightly high. Yeah. So we just did a slight little tweak there. We moved the right-hand side pole just a bit further out, opens the body up so that as you shift your hips around the arete, it feels a little bit more natural and intuitive. And then we also put the hold that you're crossing to. We actually took it out of the direct line of your hands and we shifted it up just slightly. And this little difference changes where your center of gravity is in relation to the side pole. Makes the hold and the movement coming out of it just feel a little bit more natural and intuitive. So. It's good. I like it. I think it's a cool route. We're going to run it from the start now and see how it all flows together. Can you just go straight up? Maybe.
Just go straight up to the...
Okay. Yeah. So we actually need to make a tweak there. If you repeatedly find it awkward and weird, it's good to make a change. Also during forerunning, good time to make sure that all the holds are tightened. Throughout the day of setting, drill batteries die. I know a lot of guys that set, guys and gals that set with just a drill. They don't use a wrench to come back through and tighten things, that final little quarter turn. And so during forerunning, you just want to make sure you're going through and you're actually double checking everything's on there nice and snug. That one probably went in.
Yeah, the knee gets in the way.
I think we're learning a lot. As long as we do the same thing here, like optimize.
What the heck happened? This is a low flexibility day.
Little tweaks. All right, ready, Seth?
Yep.
See what you mean by flat. Oh.
All right, so we're reaching the end of what we're going to do with this particular route. In a commercial environment, you always got to weigh the pros and cons of time spent versus value added. You have to be quick, you have to set efficiently, and you can't spend all day trying to force really nuanced movement. Sometimes you have to say good enough and move on and say, tomorrow's another day, I'm going to try again. In this instance, we have one more tweak that we need to make to ensure that this route is fair, fun, engaging, and safe for as many climbers as possible in the gym. And that one little tweak is something that, as male setters, we tend to overlook, and that is just the sheer reach that we have. I have little T-Rex arms. I actually have a -2 ape index, so I got little arms that allow me a better sense of what a short climber might experience, but there's really no substitute for having like a 5'2" person climb a route and see what they look like on that. Unfortunately, we don't have anybody that little here, so we just have to do our best to imagine what it's going to be like for them. And one move in particular I think is going to be problematic, and I want to run it just to make sure with alternative data that it's as fair for the tall climber as it is for the short climber. And that move is when we come from this volume and this pinch and we go around the arête. When you, in that video of me climbing it, you might notice I'm really stretched out here. Like my ape index is maximal, so that is about 5'7" of reach. So for a climber who's 5'7" with a negative ape index, all the way maybe down to like a 5'2" climber with a +4, they're gonna be able to climb it, but somebody shorter might have a hard time. So I have an idea for an alternative sequence here. I just wanna test it out and make sure that it works for the shorties, and then we can call it good. Your up climb jug. You're probably actually going to want it like here, huh? Well, where do you want it?
There works.
Right here?
Yeah. So you purposely put in a bolt. Oh man.
Oh no, what happened?
I'm just gonna do the move. It's awkward to go back in from the jug.
So here, instead of bumping all the way out, either there or match it. There you go, yeah.
So that works.
And that looks like it totally works. The big reach, you can see he's fully stretched out, and maybe not ideal. But the short climbers can come and they can max out upper pinch. It's good enough to establish there with the feet. So I feel relatively good putting the stamp of done on this thing. I would say it's probably like a 1 3/4 star V5. And by that I mean, I think the movement's really fun. I think it's engaging. We have a couple of different really neat sequences between the heel hook cross, which is very cool, and then it gets really burly unwinding it, and then getting up into the crimp and off of that to the pinch is actually, for me, the crux. It's really difficult standing on that dual text foot and really toeing in sideways. So we're teaching a really cool technique there. And then the finish, it's straightforward. It doesn't add a ton in terms of difficulty, but it's cool movement that lets you kind of do fist pumps to the finish, where you're like the World Cup fist pump celebration, like, yay, I did it. So overall, I think it's a pretty good route. I'm psyched on it. Good job, Brendan. All right, guys, so thanks for joining us as we talked about forerunning and all the things that go into it to make a fun, engaging, fair, and safe route. Hopefully you gleaned some things. A lot of it might have been just kind of rehashing things that you already knew. Maybe it gave you a new perspective on how to look at the act of forerunning. But just always remember that forerunning in route setting, it can be whatever you want it to be. I find that the best routes tend to come about through collaborative effort. So really working with one another, they say, this is the move that I wanted to force, what kind of ideas do you have? And I think that's where you can get some real good magic, as long as you're open to that feedback. If you're really closed off and you feel a sense of ownership over your route in a way that kind of stops you from taking that critical feedback and being able to iterate, that can be really detrimental to a route setter, their ability to progress. So hopefully you learned something. If you have any questions, you have any things that you want to add to the conversation, things that we missed or things that you would like us to clarify in a future video, just hop down to the comments or shoot me an email at anthony@escapeclimbing.com, and we'll see you next time.